Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're your guides, here to help you cut through the noise and get straight to the insights you need.
Exactly. Think of us as your shortcut to getting up to speed using the source materials you've provided. And this deep dive is part of our ongoing educational series. We're going through the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, the MPP, section by section.
Yeah, chapter by chapter. The whole idea is to help you really get a handle on U.S. patent practice. Maybe you're studying for the patent bar, or maybe you're just looking to sharpen your professional skills.
So today, we're cracking open MPP Chapter 1800. This whole chapter deals with the Patent Cooperation Treaty, or the PCT. And we're focusing specifically on MPP Section 1850.
Right, and this section, Section 1850, it's all about a really fundamental concept for international patent applications. Unity of invention before the International Searching Authority.
It sounds a bit formal, but it's the requirement that can seriously affect your strategy, your costs, everything. So we're going to unpack what it means, why it's such a big deal, and how the MPP actually guides everyone through it.
Okay, let's unpack this then. So imagine you've got this brilliant new invention, right? But maybe it's not just one thing. Maybe it's a new product and a really unique way to make it, and perhaps a special machine involved.
Yeah, several related ideas. And you want to protect all of them internationally using the PCT system.
Exactly. And that's precisely where this idea, this unity of invention, becomes absolutely crucial.
At its core, the requirement, like it says right there at MPP Section 1850, is basically that your international application needs to stick to just one invention. Or if you have multiple inventions, they have to be linked up. So linked up that they form what's called a single general inventive concept.
A single general inventive concept. So that connection, that thread tying them all together, that's what they mean by the requirement of unity of invention.
That's it. And the sources you gave us, they point to the specific rules laying this out. You've got PCT Rule 13 and also 37 CFR 1.475. It's kind of interesting how these rules pop up elsewhere too. Like that 37 CFR 1.475 is mentioned in other MPP sections, showing it's pretty central.
Okay, so if you do have these related inventions, maybe the product and the process, like we said, how does the examiner decide if they actually meet that standard, that single general inventive concept? What's the test?
Right. This is the absolute key. This is where the strategy comes in. According to the MPEP summary we looked at, unity is determined by looking for something specific. The special technical feature.
Special technical feature.
Yes.
Yes.
To meet the unity requirement, all the claimed inventions you have need to share at least one special technical feature.
Okay, special technical feature sounds, well, technical. What exactly makes a feature special in this context?
This is really where the core inventiveness of your application comes into play. The MPEP defines this special technical feature as a contribution over the prior art. It's the thing that conceptually ties the inventions together.
Contribution over the prior art.
Exactly. So it can't just be any old feature they happen to share. It has to be something that's new and non-obvious compared to what was already out there before you filed. It's that innovative piece, the spark, that provides the unifying link.
Got it. So it's the inventive nugget, the new and non-obvious part, that acts like the glue holding these potentially different claims together under one single concept. Okay, so when does this assessment happen? When does the International Searching Authority, the ISA, make this call?
Primarily, this happens during the international search phase, and also comes up during the preliminary examination phase if you opt for that. Interestingly, it can even be looked at again later when the application enters the national phase in different countries.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how you've claimed them, really, whether the different inventions are in separate independent claims or, listed as alternatives within just one claim. The rule looks at the substance of what's claimed.
Okay, and here's where it gets, like you said, really interesting. Because failing this test isn't just a procedural hiccup, right? It has real consequences. What happens if the examiner says, nope, no unity here?
Well, according to the source material, the most direct practical consequence is that the ISA, or the International Preliminary Examining Authority, they'll send you an invitation. An invitation asking you to pay additional search fees or examination fees.
Additional fees. And we know PCT fees aren't exactly pocket change. So yeah, that definitely makes getting this right up front pretty important. And there's a specific rule that governs this invitation for more money, isn't there?
Yes, exactly. That's PCT Rule 40. This rule spells out the procedure when there's a lack of unity, especially regarding that invitation to pay the extra search fees. And if you look in the MPP Subject Matter Index, you'll see PCT Rule 40 listed right there, showing it's a key procedural point.
So for anyone listening who's prepping an international application, understanding Unity isn't just academic theory. It's directly tied to managing your budget and avoiding headaches down the line. Avoiding those extra fee invitations is a big strategic win.
Absolutely. And the MPP section, Section 1850, gives us some really useful scenarios and examples to help understand how this plays out in practice. Getting these nuances is crucial.
Yeah, let's get into those. One concept that sounds particularly important, maybe a bit tricky, is this a posteriori lack of unity.
Ah, yes, a posteriori. It can seem a little counterintuitive at first glance.
A posteriori, meaning something you figure out after the initial assessment.
Precisely. You might file an application where your independent claims look unified initially. They might share a common technical feature.
Yeah.
Let's call it element A. Both Claim 1 and Claim 5 include element A.
Okay, seems straightforward. Element A is the link.
You'd think so. But here's the twist. What if, during the international search, the examiner digs up some prior art? And that prior art shows that element A was actually already known. It's not new.
So if element A isn't novel,
Then it can no longer serve as the special technical feature.
because it's not a contribution over the prior art anymore. If everyone already knew about it, it's not inventive.
Exactly right. So even though the claims share element A, because that element isn't inventive, it can't be the basis for that single inventive concept linking them. So unity is found to be lacking a posteriori meaning after considering the prior art. Is a really critical point. The shared feature must be genuinely novel and non-obvious.
That makes perfect sense now. It's not just about sharing any feature. It has to be the inventive feature. It really highlights how important the prior art search is in this whole unity determination. Okay, what about other specific situations? I think you mentioned chemical applications, Markush groups.
Yeah, Markush groups are a classic special case, very common in chemistry. These are claims where you list, several alternative chemical structures or components. MPEP Section 1850 actually gives a specific test for unity in these cases.
Okay, what's the test?
Generally, unity is considered okay if the alternatives share a common property or activity, like they all function similarly, and they either have a significant structural part in common, or they all belong to a recognized class of chemical compounds. It's a specific rule for that specific way of claiming.
Makes sense to have a tailored rule there. And it also covers claiming different types or categories of invention together, like, say, a product, the method to make it, and maybe the machine used.
Yes, the source material definitely addresses that combinations of different categories. So claims for, say, a product, a process for making that product, and an apparatus using that process can satisfy unity. The key examples given are like a process that is specially adapted to make the product,
Specially adapted.
or an apparatus that is specifically designed to carry out the process.
So the key words there are specially adapted or specifically designed. It's not just any random grouping. There needs to be a real, substantial technical link between them, tying them back to that single inventive concept. The MPP uses the word substantial link.
And the section also notes that intermediate and final chemical products can sometimes be considered unified under this logic too.
Okay, so let's say an applicant structured their claims carefully. Maybe they have different categories or a Markush group, but they still get that invitation for additional fees because the examiner found a lack of unity. Did they just have to pay up, or is there anything they can do?
No, they do have recourse. The MPP Section 1850 summary explains the protest procedure. If you, as the applicant, disagree with that finding of lack of unity, you can protest it.
Okay, how does that work? What do you have to do?
You need to submit a reasoned statement. Basically, you explain why you believe unity does exist, pointing specifically to what you argue is the special technical feature that links the inventions under a single concept. Now, typically, you still have to pay the additional fees, but you pay them under protest.
Pay under protest, got it.
Then, a review body within the ISA or the IPEA will look at your arguments, look at the examiner's original finding, and they'll make a decision. They decide if the finding of lack of unity was correct, and if not, whether you should get a refund of those fees you paid under protest.
That's good to know. It provides an important check, a way for applicants to make their case if they really think the initial assessment missed something. Okay, let's maybe zoom out a bit now. How does this unity requirement fit into the bigger picture of the PCT system? We can draw on some of the other source materials you provided here because unity is just one piece, right?
Absolutely. It's a crucial piece, but just one piece of a much larger process. Your sources confirm, for instance, that a PCT application eventually moves into the national phase. That's when it effectively becomes a national application of the specific countries the applicant chose, like becoming a U.S. national application handled by the USPTO.
Right. And the unity assessment happens during that earlier international phase before it hits the national stage. So getting it right early is key.
Definitely. And these international applications, they can also claim priority, right? Benefit from earlier filed applications.
Yeah.
Maybe a U.S. provisional or even another international application.
Yep. The sources mention that, citing the U.S. Code sections about claiming benefit. Now, while those priority claims are super important for, establishing your effective date against prior art, the unity requirement is about the claims in the PCT application itself and how they relate inventively, kind of independent of that priority chain.
That's a good distinction. We also see in the materials that these PCT applications get published internationally.
Yeah, international publication. That's covered too. And typically that publication happens after the international search report comes out.
Which is exactly when that initial unity assessment happens and when you might get that invitation for extra fees. So the timing lines up. Search first, unity check, then publication.
And just to give a little more context on the whole international IP scene, the sources even briefly mention other systems, like the Hague Agreement for Designs. Totally different rules than PCT, of course, but it just shows PCT is part of a bigger world of international IP filings.
Exactly. And when you glance at those appendices in the MPV materials, you see lists of all the other PCT rules, administrative instructions. It's vast. Unity of invention, covered in Section 1850, is vital, but it operates within this complex global system run by WIPO and all the national patent offices.
Okay, so let's bring it all back home. What does this deep dive into MPP Section 1850 and unity of invention really mean for you, our listener?
Well, fundamentally, it means you gain a really critical piece of understanding for using the PCT system smartly. Recognizing this unity requirement early on, ideally when you're first drafting the application, is just essential.
Understanding that special technical feature concept isn't just memorizing a definition, it's the actual key to making sure your claims meet the rule. And knowing about potential traps, like that posteriori lack of unity, or the specific ways they look at Markush groups or different claim categories.
It lets you anticipate problems. And crucially, it helps you avoid those unexpected and often quite expensive invitations to pay extra search fees under PCT Rule 40.
For anyone listening who's prepping for the patent bar or who works in patent prosecution day to day, the details here identifying that special technical feature, seeing how prior art can break unity after the fact, knowing how to handle different claim types, this isn't just background info. It's fundamental know-how for drafting strong international applications and guiding them through the system effectively.
Yeah, you could say this deep dive gives you a vital shortcut. It helps you get informed about a complex but absolutely essential part of international patent practice and the PCT.
So we've taken our deep dive into MP Section 1850, pulled out the core insights on unity of invention from the sources you shared, all aimed at giving you that focused understanding for your work or your studies.
And we definitely want to give a special thank you to Mike Shepard. He organized this entire educational series, making these focused looks at the MPP possible.
Absolutely. Now, just the necessary reminder. This summary of the MPP, which we put together with some help from AI tools, is really just for educational and informational purposes.
It's not legal advice. It's not a substitute for formal instruction. For the official word, you always need to consult the official MPEP documents, talk to a qualified instructor, or get advice from a registered patent practitioner.
Okay, so this whole conversation about the special technical feature being the absolute key, it does make you wonder, doesn't it? If that core inventive concept is so critical for unity, for avoiding extra fees, how might a really skilled patent attorney think about defining and articulating that feature strategically? Right there in the claims and the description, really early in the drafting process.
Yeah, not just to meet the rule on paper, but maybe to proactively guide the examiner, to really highlight the unity across maybe quite different types of claims, even before the application gets to the ISA.
Something significant to think about in the art and craft of patent drafting.
Indeed. Until next time.